Project Overseer by Stridon de Ocampo. Prologue. To what extent? To what extent would a man go to obtain absolute power? The question had haunted every century before mine, echoing in marble halls and digital chambers alike, until it finally broke through the glass of history and cut us all open. Men had asked it as if in wonder, then one man and then another tried to answer it. The result is the world that we live in today. I was not there when the world broke, but I was born in its shadow, a child of Reconstruction, breathing the recycled air of its aftermath. Still, the past lingers in the circuitry of everything we build. You can feel it humming beneath the surface of the city, like a secret waiting to be rediscovered. If I've learned anything, it's that history never dies. It only hides behind the next hologram, waiting for the right kind of fool to resurrect it. They say the beginning was 2036, though I suspect the rot had started earlier. Years of trade wars, posturing, and whispered deals beneath the conference lights. If anything, the markets trembled before the armies ever did. Then he came, President Xavier Milbrandt, a name that even now divides history like a blade. He was elected under the promise to restore the American supremacy that had long since been leaking out of its borders. A divisive figure, too charismatic for some, too transparent for others. The kind of man who spoke not to unify the nation, but rather to be adored by it. His rise was not born of genius, but of exhaustion. The people were tired, and he was a mirror that promised them power again. That same year, across the Pacific, China revealed a discovery that would ignite the fuse, a medical breakthrough that made death negotiable, organ transplants that could perfectly mimic natural tissue, a method that replaced the dying parts of a body without rejection. They called it biosynthetica. It was the first true promise of extended life, and for a brief moment, humanity stood at the threshold of something truly divine. When the White House heard of it, President Milbrandt proposed a trade alliance, science for commerce, medicine for diplomacy, but the offer was declined. China, under President Zhao Yina, feared what America might become if it gained such power, a nation no longer afraid to lose its sons, a government unbound by the morality of its leaders. To Zhao, that was not medicine, it was godhood. President Milbrandt took this refusal very personally. He called it the hoarding of salvation. He stirred the press, the preachers, and the paranoid alike into an all-out frenzy, and soon the word China was synonymous with betrayal. And when people are taught to hate something long enough, they stop asking why they began to hate it in the first place. By 2038, the streets of America became mirrors of its own politics, fractured, divided, and burning. Some wore badges of loyalty, others carried signs demanding reason. Every protest was a confession of faith, every bullet an answer to a prayer. The nation ate itself alive while the rest of the world just sat back and watched. In Beijing, Zhao observed the chaos not with fear, but with opportunity. Russia and India, both weary of American interference, saw in China's calm restraint a model of order. Quickly and quietly, the three nations aligned, a trinity of power born not from ideology, but from self-preservation. By 2041, that trinity had turned into a fortress. When China shared its medical technology with Russia and India in gratitude for their alliance, the U.S. saw it as an act of war. President Milbrandt broadcast his fury as if it were gospel. They hoard the gift of life for themselves, leaving the free world to die. Millions believed his words. Millions of others didn't. The divide between those two quote-unquote truths was where the real war began. The first battles weren't fought between nations, but rather within them. Neighbors turned on neighbors, friends turned on friends, loved ones turned on loved ones. Militias formed around ideologies, not borders. States defied federal orders, and governors tried to play the role of hero, and soon America became a theater where every man played the role of patriot and heretic both. The government's restraint was deliberate, a cruel patience. Some say President Malebranche wanted to burn away those who despised him in a civil fire, to let the country bleed itself clean. Meanwhile, the rest of the world trembled. Indonesia, still rebuilding from the economic decline and political corruption of both its past and present, watched from its fractured isles as Asia became the stage for global superpowers. The isles had always been trade routes, crossroads, and now they had become something else entirely, a quiet refuge for opportunists, exiles, and dreamers who saw the storm coming and prepared to sell umbrellas. Jakarta, even then, glowed brighter than it had any right to. The storm arrived on July 24th, 2041, the day the sky over Alaska burned. Russia launched the first strike. China followed, hammering the U.S. naval bases in the Philippines before launching a full-scale invasion when the country dared to retaliate. What began as interwoven accusations had escalated to full-scale annihilation overnight. The world called it the start of World War III, but that title felt theatrical compared to the horrors that would follow. President Zhao and the newly elected Russian Premier Bennet Sabul signed a pact that same night, behind the back of the entire world. An unholy marriage of the two nations, merging their arsenals, intelligent networks, and economies. To the public, it was temporary, but to the soldiers, it was destiny. America retaliated with fury, but internally, it was already fractured. States like California and Louisiana refused to obey President Malebranche's command, calling him a madman unfit for leadership. He punished their disobedience with neglect, cutting off federal aid. The message was clear. Loyalty brought protection, doubt invited ruin. By the time Russian boots had reached Anchorage, America was too busy killing itself to even notice. The war spread like infection. Unexpectedly, Indonesia invaded Malaysia under the guise of protective alliance, but everyone knew those were orders that they followed, and who gave said orders. Singapore resisted for nearly a month before their skyline inevitably descended into smoke and ash. China seized the Philippines by the year's end, and Russia claimed Alaska. And through it all, President Malebranche ranted to the cameras, promising retribution, divine justice, and deliverance, words that echoed hollowly in the emptying cities. Then came Red November. No one truly knows who gave the orders first, Zhao or Bennett, but in the end, it didn't really matter. Dozens of nuclear warheads fell upon the United States in one day, from west to east, like the sun setting on a great nation for the last time, the air itself catching fire. President Malebranche fled before Washington could burn. Whether it was out of cowardice or self-preservation, history will never decide. In the aftermath, the world held its breath. There was no further retaliation, no second wave, only silence, the kind that lasts for generations. Radiation swept north into Canada, hollowing it out, with cities like Vancouver and Montreal becoming ghost territories. When it was over, the richest and most powerful country in the world had become a graveyard, and slowly Canada would soon follow. Survivors fled across the oceans, carrying the ashes of their flags to wherever they could. Many found their way here to Indonesia, mainly Jakarta, where the war hadn't yet reached, but its consequences had. Zhao and Bennett emerged from the rubble not as men, but as gods made flesh. Together they announced the creation of a new empire, the People's Empire of China, or the PEC. They did not conquer, they simply invited. Nations joined them not out of faith, but rather out of fear. Slowly but surely, Mongolia, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, one by one they knelt, preferring the shadow of safety rather than the light of annihilation. Indonesia was the only nation that refused, politely and strategically, And somehow, impossibly, the PEC respected it. Perhaps Zhao and Bennett saw in Indonesia a mirror of their younger selves, ambitious, fractured, but willing to obey if properly rewarded. The alliance between them was born in silence and sealed in bloodless understanding. The decades that followed were not of peace, but rather of pause. Technology surged forward. The world rebuilt itself with trembling hands. The PEC focused on medicine, life extension, neural repair, and bioaugmentation, while Indonesia became a new frontier for engineering, artificial intelligence, and above all else, surveillance. They called it Neo-Indonesia, though the old name still lingered on the tongues of those who remembered the oceans and rain instead of the steel and circuitry. Jakarta became its crown jewel, a city of mirrors and shadows, where the rain fell in holographic advertisements and the skyline bled into the sea itself. People came here to reinvent themselves, refugees, inventors, fugitives, all chasing the illusion of freedom in a city built on watching them. By the 2060s, rebellion was not an act of courage, but of faith. Small cells formed in the undercity, hidden beneath the neon lights. The government responded with quiet precision, not through soldiers, but through observation. They said it was for safety. They said every camera was an eye of mercy. But then came the birth of the Overseer. The title sounded ancient, almost religious in a way, but it was a creation of mathematics, a leader who controlled every network, every algorithm, every feed of the ever-expanding surveillance state. The Overseer was chosen in 2067, personally endorsed by Bennett and Zhao themselves before Zhao's death. Since then, no one has seen his face. He is said to exist in the systems and networks themselves, a ghost of authority, a hand that touches every device, but no one can touch back. His voice is law, his silence, the world's permission to breathe. And so, here we are, 2081. The city thrives, or at least it pretends to. You can walk through Jakarta now and see drones the size of birds nesting on the streetlights, scanning faces with patient indifference. Vendors sell noodles beneath the digital rain. The holograms hum lullabies over intersections. But regardless of the situation, somewhere in the distance, someone is always watching. And beneath it all, rebellion still whispers, though it no longer knows what freedom truly means. Sometimes when the night is quiet and the hum of the city softens to a pulse, I think about how it all began, how one man's ambitions spiraled into the age of control we now call normal. Perhaps power was never the disease, but rather the symptom of something much deeper. The fear of insignificance, the same fear that drives leaders to conquer and men like me to hunt. That same fear is what brought me here, Jakarta, the shining carcass of progress, a city of contracts and shadows. It offered me purpose, coin, and a place to bury what I had lost. I took the offer. I always do. But I often wonder if the city took something from me in return. Maybe that's what this all is. A trade I didn't understand when I made it.